Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we talk with Julia Torres, Paula Chase, and Olugbemisola. Sorry, Bamy, I apologize. Rhuday-Perkovich. As we talk about hidden strengths in children's books, and in particular, two books that came out this year that you need to get. It doesn't take a genius and keeping it real. Both of them are very good, and I think you should have them on your shelf, especially if you're a middle grade teacher or librarian. I'm Kathy. I own Brainler Books here in South Bend, Indiana. We are a primarily children's bookstore that focuses on uplifting marginalized voices. That means we focus on Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ, students, children with disabilities. We try to find those books and get them into the hands of children, and we work with schools to kind of diversify the lessons that they're teaching in schools right now. We have a code of conduct, and it pertains to all of our events. We expect that everyone is here to build a stronger community centered around the discussion of inclusive literature. Our goal is to create an environment where traditionally marginalized voices feel welcome to participate, speak up, ask questions, and engage in conversations. This requires a harassment-free and inclusive environment that recognizes the inherent worth of every participant. We invite all those who participate to help us create a safe and positive experience for everyone. I'd like to introduce you to Julia. Julia will be moderating tonight. I'll introduce her and then Paula and Bamy, and then they will take it over. Right. Julia is a nationally recognized veteran language arts teacher librarian in Denver, Colorado. She facilitates teacher development workshops rooted in the areas of anti-racist education, equity, and access and literacy and librarianship, and education as a practice of liberation. Julia's work has been featured on NPR, Al Jazeera's The Stream, PBS Education, KQED's Mind Shift, Rethinking Schools, Learning for Justice Magazine, and many more. She's a current Amelia Elizabeth Walden Book Award Committee member, a member of both the Book Love Foundation and Allen Board of Directors, an educator steering committee member, Educator Collaborative Book Ambassador, and a co-founder of Disrupt Text. Make sure you're following her on Twitter. All right. And then we have Paula. Paula co-founded the Brown Bookshelf, and she's a longtime inclusion Jedi, an advocate for diversifying the type of fiction featuring Black characters as highlighted among educators, librarians, and parents. She's presented and blogged about the need to expand the focus beyond children's literature that centers the pain of Black children. Chase is the author of 9 children's books. So Done, her critically acclaimed middle grade debut, was named a 2018 Kirkus Review's Best Book. So Done and his companions Doughboys and Turning Point are blazing the trail for books that tackle tough and sometimes taboo topics for younger readers. Excuse me. Bamy Rhuday-Perkovich is the author of several children's books, including 8th Grade Super Zero, which I encourage you to try to find anywhere, especially if you're trying to help kids become activists in their own rights. This is a great book for that. The Two Naomis, co-authored with Audrey Vernick, which was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. It Doesn't Take a Genius, which you need to get right now. Operation Sisterhood, Above and Beyond, NASA's Journey to Tomorrow, Saving Earth, as well as the picture book Someday as Now, which is also good to have in your library right now, and May Makes a Way. She is a member of the Brown Bookshelf and editor of the We Need Diverse Books anthology, The Hero Next Door. Great to use in language arts classrooms. She lives with her family in New York City, where she writes, makes things, and needs to get more sleep. Find her on social media also. So I'm going to jump off and put these 3 powerhouse people on, and so you can hear what they have to say.
Hi. Okay, I think I see us all in a row. This is amazing. What's up? Hey.
Hey!
Wow. So we're here to talk about hidden strengths, but we are just going to talk. Hopefully, folks will be able to ask questions somehow or at some point. But we're just going to talk about the work, and we're going to talk about you, and we're going to talk about process and how folks can bring these books into schools, and we're going to celebrate. So first of all,
Yes.
I want to say how honored I am to be here with the two of you. Thank you so much. for agreeing to be in conversation with me. It is a huge honor, and I am always excited when I get one of your books in my hands, because I know, middle grade books, a lot of times folks dismiss and they say, oh, that's just going to be a quick read, or that's just going to be something that, I can get through, because sometimes I've noticed, of course, that the font size is a little bit different on the page. But I was talking to high schoolers the other day, and I was saying, don't discount the middle grade book for being an experience that will help you confront life's challenges and will help you kind of think about how you formed as a person and as a character, in your own life, in the story of your own life. So, I want to ask you about, of course, process and protagonists and how you come up with some of these characters. But I also want to ask you this question. If you were a character in your own middle grade story, what would this protagonist be like? What are some characteristics that you feel you developed during the middle grade years that you have with you today? And then we'll jump right into the books.
I don't know about Bambi, but in middle school, I was really, I wasn't shy. I don't think those words ever applied to me, but I definitely was, I was kind of needy. I was a little, and it may not have been like outwardly so, but I was kind of needy. Like I definitely needed that validation. My friendships were important. And so sometimes, I would do things that I didn't want to do. Nothing bad, nothing illegal. I'm just saying that I'd go along with stuff just because I really wanted, I always loved the comfort of a friend circle. So I mean, and I think that's kind of typical for that age group. I definitely wasn't as good as some of my characters are pretty, they're pretty badass.
Yeah, I know. That's the point. That's what I love. I mean, what about you?
I think there's definitely a little bit of me in all of my characters, I would say. But middle school, I was definitely very shy. It was starting middle school was a time where we were just moving from Lagos, Nigeria to New York. And we had moved a lot, and we kept moving a little bit more. But so I was just kind of observing and trying to figure out where I was going to fit in a new environment, a new culture. I was so shy that my parents had me forced me to do drama and theater. Then I got really into it and loved it and kept on doing it. And I think that's really helped me a lot with writing. I love character, and that's kind of my main thing, in dialogue with writing. And I think getting into theater early, and then even for a little while thinking that I was going to be a playwright, has had a big impact on me in my writing.
I can't even imagine moving from another country in middle school. Like, what an age to have to adjust to an entirely different culture here. I can't even imagine that.
I mean, we moved every single grade up until 7th.
Wow. That's a lot of adjustment.
It was a lot of moving, and each time it was very different, but it was good for a writer, because you had to notice things, you had to pay attention to details, you had to make sure you came in and fit in.
Yeah, you have to be flexible and go with it.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear, be a little bit more specific now and just talk about specific characters. I always love hearing how folks come up with names. Because there's just so many possible names that you could come up with in the realm of possibility in the world. So how did you settle on, for these specific ones, we can say Marigold and Emmett. How did you, and I'm talking about these two for people who are watching.
Okay, I'm gonna admit something that it's hard, because I don't want anybody to think that I was being ignorant when I did this. But in my head, I try to think about where So like where a character is rooted. And Marigold is rooted, her family comes from like a working class neighborhood, and they were very, young when they started dating, and they're very like hip hop, they're very steeped in hip hop. And so I purposely like wanted to give her this name that was happy, but like also a little ghetto. So I don't talk about her middle name that much, but I think at one point, Miss Sadie calls her Mary Henny. Her middle name is Hennessy. Like I purposely named her Marigold Hennessy because I wanted it to be like this nod to like these young parents who were kind of
yeah, just figuring it out and just being like, this makes sense. Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And then that's just her nickname, Mary Henny, but like only, her family calls her that.
Yeah, that's cool. Demi, what about you?
So Emmett was actually hard because I did not come up with that name. The book is meant to be a companion to a film that Miles Brown starred in called Boy Genius. And so the character in the film was already named Emmett. And when I first read the script, when I think about
Sorry.
Hi, friend.
Someone is ready for their close-up.
Yep. And her dinner. This is Maisie. Miss Maisie. He's bad. Go ahead.
So when I think of the name Emmett and a young black boy, I immediately thought of Emmett Till. So I asked the filmmakers if that was who the character was named after, and they said no. But then when I was working out what the story was going to be for the book, I thought, okay, that probably would be a question that this character would get asked, especially by older adults, like, oh, you must be named after Emmett Till. Do you know the story of Emmett Till? And so that also sort of became part of how I developed his character and his story.
That's what I thought of at the very first when I started reading it was Emmett Till.
Yep.
I'll be honest, Paula, I don't want to say that I pigeonhole you, but I like if someone were to ask me for descriptors, what's a Paula Chase book got in it? I'm going to say there's going to be some suburban stuff. There's going to be some black kids. There's going to be some, kind of like mixing up people's stereotypical views of how black people operate in these predominantly white spaces. And Bemi, if someone were to ask me, what is somewhat characteristic of your books, I always think like characters that people wouldn't expect to be brave and outspoken, but then they have that deep inside of them, like so maybe I'm a little quieter on the outside and you might not expect this of me, but I have a lot of courage, and I would also, of course, I'm imagining the book about the Oklahoma sit-ins, like that cover, because I walk down the street and sometimes that book is in the display window of various shops. People like to give that book as a gift. Yeah.
Nice.
So, I think about history and I think about how you merge figures from history with our modern stories. So I think a question that folks might be thinking about and wondering is, what kind of responsibility do you feel to change up or flip the script on how people see Black people? Where do your words fit in there?
I don't know if I do feel that responsibility because I am writing for us. And so I think we already know that, our characters kind of keep a foot in, multiple worlds. So, and it's not anything that I really have to explain. You kind of get that, even if you're not from, a specific upper middle class, working class, no matter where you're from, I think that you're used to kind of walking, with your feet straddling two lanes all the time. So I don't know that I feel like I have to flip the script. It might be for non-Black readers, but then it's a good window for them.
And it can be for our own benefit, right? When you see yourself reflected, like, having a Starbucks or meeting at like a coffee shop or just in suburbia, living your regular life. I think that's very validating because that doesn't show up in a lot of books. It's always got to be some kind of dramatic setting, or it's a setting that is like a predominantly Black space, which we can talk about that later, but there are plenty of white authors who have written about Black people existing in these predominantly Black spaces. They have this strange imagination of how we show up and act that may or may not be rooted in truth. And that comes across on the page. And your books are in opposition to that, definitely presenting a counter narrative.
Yeah, and the funny part is, like, what comes to mind is when I read Two Naomis, and I remember loving the part where they would go to the bakery, and something just that simple, you know, as if that's something that like Black people don't do or whatever. Like, it's just those tiny little things that you just enjoy seeing, like you said, reflected back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like writing about our ordinary us and our ordinary lives and multifaceted lives. And I don't even feel like Paula, I don't feel like I need to flip anything or tell anything in particular. I think we need all the stories about us. We have so many stories ourselves. And so I would never say, like, oh, we don't need any more of this kind of story, or we should only have what some people consider positive stories. We are all stories, and we deserve all the stories about all the different aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. And I think that, go ahead, Paula.
But you know what? And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because that's absolutely true. But I've been trying to think about ways to have this conversation. So maybe you all can help me out. It's true. We need all stories, and all of our stories are important. How do we then relay, though, the importance of making sure that these stories are kind of weaved into what's usually propped up, though? Like, because all of our stories are important, but when we talk about the ones that win awards, and I don't want an award for an award's sake, I'm saying because awards matter sometimes to librarians and even to parents. How do we make sure that all of those stories do get told, where we are telling outside of what normally gets that type of accolade and thus push?
So, speaking as someone who is currently on an awards committee, I'm going to tell you that award criteria is strange in a way, because there will be a rubric that will have these indicators, and I'm probably not allowed to say too much. I'll get kicked off the awards committee. But, you know, who developed these awards? And there is one award that, well, two, you know, there are probably more, but I'm thinking immediately of John Steptoe and Coretta Scott King Awards. You know, those are very specifically for Black creators, Black stories. You know, and I almost feel like there should be a large scale review of the awards that exist out there. What's their history? Who created the rubric? Is there a process for revising the rubric periodically? Because I'll tell you right now, like, reading for awards, I have not yet come upon one that recognizes, like, science fiction or fantasy for young people. So it's really hard when you're reading and you have science fiction and fantasy books among the plethora of books that you're reading, because the rubrics don't always recognize what goes into writing those kinds of stories. It's very different from writing those set in the real world. Speaking of which, in keeping it real, because we are in part here to talk about this as well, you know, you've got to create this fictional world set in the real one. So you have these components, and you're going to have kids doing the things that kids their age would do, speaking the way that they speak, having the pages, like, you know, having the conversations that look the way that they might look, you know, where you have the different conversations where folks are talking back and forth in their own vernacular. So how do you go about doing that? I mean, you have a child, but she's older than these kids. But at one point you did have, you know, a child that was this age. So just talk to me about that, both of you. How do you go about keeping it real, making it realistic?
I don't worry about, because somebody else asked me about slang. Sometimes I'll just make it up. I'll just make up slang, because slang is a vibe. And and as long as you're using it in a context that people understand it, I can make up any word, and sometimes I do. And so I've never had the luxury of relying on my kids, because when I first started writing, I only had one daughter, and she was younger than the age I was writing about, and now they're both older than the age that I'm writing about. So I rely more on just making sure I hit that vibe, making sure I hit that sweet spot in terms of the secret life that we know kids live outside of us. And I just think about, what is it, I know I was like that once, where I would, kind of talk mess and, maybe curse here and there outside of my parents. I just think about that some kids do that and some don't. And I just kind of infuse that in the writing.
Yeah, same here. It's like I had a writing teacher really stress that, like, you're not only the age you are, but you're all the ages that you've been.
Okay.
And as a writer, you can stay in touch with yourself at whatever age you're writing about, and also just paying attention to the culture of that age and paying attention to kids. And I do the same thing, just kind of make it up. I think if you create a believable and rich enough fictional world within that, then you can play and you can do those things and create your own slang or whatever you want to create. And it is real because you've created a real world.
Well, and so let's talk a little bit about this now then. This in part was a story that you were saying came from somebody else's story, right?
Yeah.
So in Library Land, this is a different manifestation of the same work, right? Because they talk about manifestation, or they talk about an original work and then a manifestation of that work, and then different versions of that manifestation, and then different items that go with the different versions. So we're talking movie, book, audiobook, ebook, all of the different ways to access this story, which, perhaps, Paula, is there an audiobook? I don't even know. I'm embarrassed. Is there an audiobook?
There is, yes.
Okay. Did you narrate it?
I did not.
Okay. So then does it have different, is it one of those that has the different voices for the different parts?
It's only the one voice actor, but trying to do the different voices, but only one voice actor, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the idea of having different manifestations of the same work is really interesting because you can get access to different audiences. So what about your process for this, Bemi? How did that happen? How did that come together?
So I had sort of freedom to do whatever. They were like, basically, kind of, if you can't keep the main character at least.
Okay.
So what I was really interested in when I watched the film was the relationship between the two brothers in the film. And there was sort of the film ended with this idea that the older brother was going to be going away to school. Okay. And in the film, Miles Brown character Emmett was a genius and like really smart. And so, and the town, it wasn't specified in the film, but it was a predominantly white town from what I could see. So when I was thinking about the story for the book, I thought that what I wanted to do was something that took place after the events of the film and really focused on the relationship of the two brothers, put them in an all-Black environment, and put Emmett in the situation where, he had been like the genius and he was so smart, but then he's in a situation where everybody's smart. Mm-hmm. And everybody's special and everybody's a genius. Mm-hmm. And so then he's sort of like, who am I supposed to be now? Mm-hmm. And then I also, like, I know Miles Brown from Blackish, and then sort of thought about him and his personality and like things that, like dance. So I put that in the book because he is a dancer. And so little things like that. And then I had fun putting them at this fictional all-Black summer camp that was very, very lightly based on a camp that I did go to, I guess maybe when I was in 7th or 8th grade for like a week. It wasn't like a genius camp or anything like that, but it was sort of historic Black kind of bougie camp.
I love that though. First of all, how often do you see Black people outside? You know, like enjoying nature. I read this article once that talked about the broification of the outdoors. If you Google it, it'll probably come up. The broification of like outdoor enjoyment. I am one of those people, one of those
there.
people who
hold up. We have just all outed ourselves as being out there. So the outdoors has been broified. We used to go camping when I was a kid. Now my husband will not camp, but as a kid, we used to go camping all the time. Yeah. And me and my cousins definitely went to summer camp like at least 4 different times. It wasn't a Black camp. That would have been cool. But we've always been out here.
That would have been amazing. And yes, we have always been out here. My father, who was born in I want to say 1956 or something, he was a camper. He knew how to do all the stuff. So when I started doing it, my mother, who's a little more bougie, she was like, I don't know where you got this gene because I don't like to do these things, but I was out there. I made a box oven and I made some cornbread in my box oven.
I love it.
I mean, you take an actual box, put the hangers straightened out in there, put the fire inside, the tinfoil lines it, and I made cornbread and it was good. It was not raw in the middle. It turned out great.
You are true to this. You made a whole, you are true to this, girl.
Julia's no joke.
I'm still proud of that box oven.
You should.
I didn't know that my cornbread was going to turn out. I was hoping, but I didn't know. And then it came out and it was just beautiful and, crusty on top. I was very excited about that.
Okay. More books with Black campers.
Yes,
I need it.
And snowboarders. And snowboarders and mountain bikers and dirt bikers and hikers. Yeah. Just doing all of that stuff because I know that there's a lot of conversation about how folks can heal by being outdoors, especially when we've been on lockdown and we've been inside for so long and, we've been in isolation and whatnot. I think that even so much to the point where I'm confused about whether people need to relearn how to be around other people sometimes. But I think being outdoors is so good for you. And I know our mutual friend whom we love, Renee Watson, has a short story in Black Enough that also has kids at camp. And this time it's Black girls. And, I think that having us outside more is a must. And snowboarding, I think I might be the only Black woman I know who snowboards. I don't know anybody else.
See, I just can't. I can't mess with the cold too much. That's all.
There are clothes for that. I have the Under Armour 4.0 gear. You just put those long johns on, and
I'll try it. You can teach me. Yeah, I'll try it.
I have been tubing, and I loved it, and it was fun. But that's probably it. I don't know that I am. Have enough core strength to do snowboarding where I can keep myself up though.
Well, I would say that one of the things that I now I have wiped out plenty of times and I am in chiropractic care constantly because of injuries and whatnot. But one of the things that I love so much about snowboarding is that your adrenaline will get going. And when you go on one of those tree runs where you're going through the trees, there's just nothing like it. It's so fun. So please have some more Black people and girls specifically doing outdoor things. I absolutely love because my kids grew up in suburbia. And, one of the things that I do think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about is how your characters deal with microaggressions or how they deal with the small moments that are, where they have to, Bemi, in this one, I would say I really appreciate the attention to Black history. And I appreciate that because there's a lot of history that our kids don't learn in school. And so you wind up learning it at home from your family because people are it depends. What I'm speaking specifically about Black kids that are in a predominantly white space. That means they grow up in predominantly white suburbia. So unfortunately, I don't want to out anybody, but one of my children had the chance to go on a trip to DC, and I asked if they go to the African American History Museum and was given a whole bunch of excuses about why they don't do that. They go to the Holocaust Museum, but they don't go to the African American History Museum. And how can you go to DC and not go to that museum? So anyway, I'd love to just talk a little bit about what goes through your mind when you are creating a scene or an encounter where a character is going to have to confront external racism that's going on, either overt or covert?
Normally, some of my other books, it's a little more, the characters actually react. What's interesting about keeping it real in Marigold is that, she's very aware of those microaggressions. And, and the book tells us that her mother is definitely always ready for, when she comes home to say that, she's had that kind of encounter. But she also has been in this private school for so long that I think for her, it's almost like, yeah, this sucks, but I'm not going to sit here and put my energy into it. Like that's sort of the vibe I've given her, which is exactly why she and the character Justice, end up at odds a little bit right at the end of the school year, because for him, it's more in his face. He takes it more personally, and he feels it more, because he's on the scholarship that can be taken away from him at any moment. So, and that's a little different for me, because most of my characters, I think I do show them reacting to those microaggressions, but I chose not to do that with Marigold because I needed her, I needed that difference between her and Justice. I didn't want her to be so aware, even though she was in it all the time. I needed her to see it so that when she faced that situation, with the other characters from a different class background, that, it would be like, is that a mirror up to her face that she even recognized, that she's kind of doing some of the same stuff to them that maybe the white kids do to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, it was definitely sort of a theme in Naomi's too, where Naomi Marie, the girls are starting middle school, and Naomi Marie is in a lot of situations where she feels like something's not right, or she feels like something that another child or an adult says to her is racist, or maybe it's racist, or maybe it's not. She's a little bit, it throws her off a little bit. She feels a little off center, and she sort of has to deal with that situation of when she questions it, having the white person sort of jump down her throat, like, oh, are you calling me racist? Or, oh, I can't believe you're saying that about me. And she sort of through the story has to figure out, one, realize that, oh, okay, the me that I see and know is not necessarily the me that everybody else sees.
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take a genius, because it's in deliberately an all Black setting. Mm-hmm. But there are times when anti-Blackness within the community comes up, and sort of making judgments about each other and making decisions about who belongs and who doesn't, and who is more valued in the community and why, is a part of the story.
And that's really important because, we have to deal with those things as adults too. And so one of the things that as I was saying earlier, I'm a big proponent of not abandoning middle grade books just because your body is in high school. So I always encourage folks to read the books that look interesting to them, not just ones that people say are written at your level. And I think of so many middle grade books as being those books that, one, allow someone to explore the development of their character or who they are. And I don't mean fictional character, I mean like your personal character, who you are as an individual. And I don't see, I'm in a predominantly Black and brown community. So unfortunately, folks who are in predominantly white communities, many of them still feel like they have to argue and push books that are about Black characters into the curriculum, into the lives of the students, because there are students who they want mirror books themselves. However, the world is full of mirrors for white people. And so that's something that I talk about a lot, is that, you know, I can go on Netflix right now and just do a regular search for like cooking show. And the first 40 results, possibly 30, but the majority of them will be featuring white people. And
don't get me started on television, especially children's television and like middle grade, tween, teen kids TV.
yeah. And that
You
is
know,
why we have to make that, you know, that emphasis that it's not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio.
you know, and I have one of the reasons that, and God bless Green Willow and HarperCollins, because they have listened to me. One of the reasons why I've pushed so hard to make sure that my covers matured a little bit is because of those older readers that you're talking about, Julia. Oh, look at this spoiled thing. Spoiled, look at you.
Baby.
He's cute.
There we go. This is my baby boy. He's so cute. Keep going, Paula. Keep going. Really just get your hair down.
Well, but you know, but pushing for covers like you know, Keeping It Real and Turning Point, where the covers begin to really, you know, appeal to an older teen reader, because the books say ages 8 to 12. First of all, they're not for 8-year-olds. I don't believe my books are for 8-year-olds. I'll say it. I'll scream it from the rooftop. But they can be for that older student. But if, you know, those covers are too, you know, if the characters are skewing too young on there or whatever, then of course an older reader is going to feel some kind of way about picking it up. We need to make sure that those books, you know, appeal to them, at least so that they don't feel some kind of way about having to carry it around.
Right, because we unfortunately do have a culture where where kids will shame one another, you know, and I think I'm always thinking about how can we build a culture of supporting one another. So how can we make sure that the young folks are supporting one another no matter what their reading choices are? If someone wants to get Bemi's picture book and sit down and read that for a minute, they're still going to learn some history. It probably will be relaxing. If they're an emerging reader who happens to just be learning English, then that still might be a challenge for them. So let them have that experience. Why do we need to be taking those away from people? You know, I think that one of the conversations that I do have a lot with people is about leveling and how harmful that can be and why we still do it, even though we know that it's harmful. And another conversation that people are reaching out to me pretty frequently about is the censorship piece. You know, I mean, I don't know if either of you have had to deal with that, because from my perspective, I don't know that there's anything in either of these books but I'm not one of those parents that's like, take this out of the library. So I'm not seeing it with those super sensitive eyes. But you know, have you had to deal with censorship? If so, have you had folks being like, take this book out of especially you, Bemi, because people don't want folks knowing about Black history. So, you know, have you experienced that?
I've had an experience. The most vivid one I can remember is with a visit, actually, and it was with 8th grade Super Zero, where I was with a group of authors, and we were all to read an excerpt, and I got a call asking me specifically that I not read a certain part of the book. And I wasn't planning to anyway, but then once I got that call, I was like, oh, I want to read that part. But I was like, what could be objectionable in 8th grade Super Zero? Like, I mean, it didn't make any sense to me, but what it was a little line of internal monologue where the main character, Reggie, who's Black, talks about how his friend, Josie, who's white, doesn't have to deal with some of the things he has to deal with.
What? Somebody objected to that?
They objected to that, and the librarian at the school explained to me that, and this was a New York City school, independent school in New York City, that their middle school students had not yet dealt with those issues and had not yet confronted those issues, and they wouldn't really know how to understand that part of the book.
Wow.
See,
and then as a parent volunteer in school libraries, I've definitely had a lot of experiences where parents were Yeah.
Not ready. I mean, what a luxury to not have to talk about it or think about it or deal with it until middle school.
Yeah, and say things like, my daughter, I had a parent say like, oh, my daughter's favorite crayon is brown. And so she loves Black people. Like, I don't want her to, I don't want her to read about people
My
not
face.
liking Black people. Exactly.
Wow.
Because she already loves brown.
Wow.
I've heard a lot of that kind of thing.
So,
yeah.
Julia and I were just on a panel for YELSA, and we were just talking about that. The what did I call it, Julia? The audacity to the right to innocence.
Yes.
And how unfair it is for a set of parents to feel like the innocence of their child is more important than someone else's lived experience. Like, we're usually writing about a child who is also going through this. And I just cannot, it's amazing to me that we're starting to get more and more pushback. I haven't had any for my books, but I don't know if you all know, but like last night, Nikki Grimes found out that, has been some pushback for her Diamond Daniel series. And I'm like, what?
Which is one of the best chapter book series ever. Yeah.
I will say that I don't spend a lot of time in chapter book land. I'm mostly in the picture book land, and then I jump over to middle grade and YA because I use picture books with older students, but I don't usually use chapter books with the older students. But I think that what people find objectionable is so sad to me. And it also reveals a lot about how people are protected from how their reality is shaped. There's a show called Black Mirror, and there's an episode called Archangel where a mom she has a tablet and she can censor her child's experience depending on.
I remember that episode.
Remember that? Does she want to hear a dog barking? No, because she wants her child to be scared. So she censors the experience so her child doesn't hear the dog barking. And there's a really powerful lesson in that story. I will say that, I mean, obviously I have so much appreciation for the work that you do for our kids, but I think that adults could benefit from reading these books too, because so many adults are in a position of, I don't know how many realize, if you look around at your friend circle, how diverse is it, and how deep are those friendships? Because I recently saw someone saying, it was just a random comment that I saw on social media, but somebody said there are so many people at my job who would consider us friends and we are not. Speaking specifically about white people,
Yeah.
Which is why the relationships that you all sketch out in these books and these conversations and interactions are key for folks to kind of like be able to analyze and do that self-assessment and that self-reflection. And when they're reading it from a kid, hopefully that will help them apply some of these lessons, because middle grade books are wonderful for just getting at, this is how I changed as a character and this is the lesson. I love that it always will have those, it usually will have those things. And it doesn't always happen at the end, but I mean, the lesson for the reader is apparent too,
Well, I've not made it any secret that one of the reasons that I write the way I do is because I know that my books have to funnel through an educator, through a librarian to a kid. And so I am in part trying to make sure that librarians and educators can empathize with some of maybe the students that they're teaching, that they're seeing some of the characteristics of my character in the students around them, and that maybe they, think a little bit about how they're engaging with them. So, and I've definitely come out and said that before.
That's important. That's important for folks to hear, because everybody is going to need to make space for these books, and everyone's going to need to understand how important it is. And everyone's going to need to understand that it's going to be important to blend these books into the reality of the experience that our students are having, not necessarily separate them and say, okay, we're going to do a unit on the Black books. Let's learn about Black history. But maybe we're learning about history that belongs to all of us because, you know, we all know Black history is everyone's history. Black American history is everyone's history, you know? Okay, sorry.
And that was his cue to come through.
That was his cue to come through because he's a Black.
It really was.
He said, did you say Black?
Yeah, he said Black. You were actually calling me because I'm beautiful and shiny and Black and fabulous. He loves himself and to be on camera. You know this.
Very obvious.
For any, look at that. Isn't he?
Look at how he's looking at the camera. He knows.
Right at the camera. That's
He knows. He knows that. Look at how shiny that beautiful fur is.
Yes.
Yeah, he's purring right now.
Oh.
Well,
So curious.
are there any things that you want the audience to take away? We talked all the way through. I didn't even look and see if we had any questions. If anyone from Brain Layer wants to drop questions that anyone watching has into the chat, please do. But I'd love to hear from you too. If there is a takeaway that a young viewer could have from watching this, what can they look forward to in reading your books? Not just these two, but any of them. What can they look forward to?
I always say, my only job is to take readers on a ride with that character through the highs and the lows. And I just want them to have fun. And if they come out on the other side of that ride, feeling more empathetic for somebody's situation or a better understanding of themselves and how they might handle a situation, then that is perfect. But I just want it to be a roller coaster ride.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's so much in my stories that, like, I draw so much from the kids that I meet at different schools or different visits and libraries. And, like, even directly, sometimes kids are like, put me in a book, put me in a book. Or put my name. I went to one school where all of the kids just put their names on Post-its. And they were like, put my name in a book, put my name in a book. And so I really want readers to feel seen.
Yeah.
And to feel that they don't have to achieve anything considered extraordinary or do anything extra. They can just be and be themselves and know that they're seen and that they're loved through the stories.
I love that so much. And loved with just like you said, just as they are. I don't even want to bring up the word imperfections because we all have them. But, I was one who suffered from what they call pretty brown girl syndrome, where I expected in school, I felt like people expected me to be perfect. That was absolutely a feeling that I had that I've carried with me into adulthood. And I don't mind in a moment of vulnerability feeling like sometimes people assume that I don't make mistakes, and that's really difficult. That's a lot of weight to carry. Before we go, my favorite books, I like the Oklahoma Sit-ins one, Bemi. And I like Turning Point from you, Paula. And I really like Two Naomis and Naomi's too. So we've got Project Sisterhood coming out.
Yes.
Do you mind telling people just a bit about your next projects? Paula, I don't know if you're working on a next project yet, and if you feel free to talk about it, that's okay. But
Paula's working on some big next projects.
Okay, so it's finally out. It's finally out that I am writing 2 middle grade books with Tiffany Haddish. And I'm really excited about it because it's actually my first entry into traditional middle grade. The character is only 12. Okay. So yeah, that's really new for me, and I'm really excited about that. But on the flip side of that, because it's not till 2023, I'm also back in my original, and that's young adult. So I also have a young adult book coming out in 2023. So I'm all over the place.
So we can look for 3 different projects from you coming up in the next few years.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Bemi, tell us about Project Sisterhood before we go.
So Operation Sisterhood is my next one, and that's in January. That is middle grade, and that is 4 sisters, and they're a girl band. And they're a little wacky, and They live in New York City and they are homeschooled. They call it free schooling. And they're just kind of doing their thing around the city. And it was one that I really wanted to give the kids of New York a joyful story. We've been through a lot in the city in the last couple of years. And so it was important to me to sort of show some joy about our kids, and also because New York City stories are often not joyful, and the kids of the city are not seen as just regular kids having fun. And then after that, I have a couple of nonfiction, middle grade nonfiction books. I have some easy readers.
My child. Hi, I'm Jackie.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to see you.
She's back from being out with her little friends.
Have fun. Love you.
Oh, so good to see you.
Good to see you too. Have a good night.
You too. Have fun.
Thank you.
You can tell she's used to that. She's just all in.
Yes,
Like, yes,
yep.
it's me.
Like,
It's
okay,
the wonder
yeah.
child.
One time, Jackie Woodson and I were in conversation, and her child came in, and I was like, you know what? If my child comes in, I think I'm just gonna let him do it going forward.
We're not brain surgeons. They're not walking into a surgery, so
We're family.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
yeah. Well,
I do want to say that I love the cover of Project Sisterhood. I love that cover so much.
Operation Sister, I got it right over here.
Oh,
Do you have it, Emmy? You have it?
Yeah, let me.
Yeah, I love that cover too, Paula. It's so cool.
This cover was
Yes.
done by Brittany Bond is the artist, and she's fantastic.
It looks like so much fun.
It just
I love it.
it makes me so happy, and it would have made me so happy when the girls in the book are 11, 10, 11, and it would have been such a treat for me at that age too to see these girls.
I saw myself in the one with the little green sweater. I don't know why, but at the time I had short hair, and I was like, that is me. Okay.
That's me, yeah.
I was just ready. I'm always going to be looking for which one of them has some of my traits, Bambi.
That's funny because she's the animal lover.
Really? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's definitely my little couple finger then. I'm gonna read that one next. I'm going on vacation next month, so I'm looking forward to reading it on vacation.
Kathy had to come on to sweep us off like the Apollo theater, like Sandman. She had to come.
Okay. She's gonna cut the mic soon.
I was thinking about getting that little hook thing. I'm like, I could just remove them from the stream. They won't even notice. But thank you three so much. That was just, it went so quickly though. That was so amazing. That was just amazing. I'm sorry. I can't, there's no other words for me. Last week I had Lamar and Kwame Mbalia, and this week to have you guys, that's just been a treat for me.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
I didn't have these books growing up, and now I get to read these books and I get to share them with people, and that is just such a joy. And like Julia said, I share them with everyone. Not just Black kids. And I don't like when booksellers say, how do I sell these books? I'm like, they're books. You sell them how you sell all the books. Like there's no difference. And I hope I live to see the day when that's a thing. Like we don't have to worry about that. And that Black joy is always celebrated. And that Black history is history. Just all of those things. I appreciate the work that all three of you do. And if there's any way I can help you do more of it, please let me know. We have a nonprofit.
Kathy,
we help people. Please, just let me know what you guys need. I'm in for it. So thank you so much. You guys have a great evening. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this tonight. It was wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.
So good to see you. Bye.